The Conclave. That day, convoked by Arcade and Zeta, the rebellious angels met together on the banks of the Seine at La Jonchère, in a deserted and tumble-down entertainment hall that Princester had hired from a pothousekeeper called Baratin. 300 angels crowded together in the stalls and boxes. A table, an armchair, and a collection of small chairs were arranged on the stage, where hung the tattered remnants of a piece of rustic scenery. The walls, colored in distemper with flowers and fruit, were cracked and stained with damp, and were crumbling away in flakes. The vulgar and poverty-stricken appearance of the place rendered the grandeur of the passions exhibited therein all the more striking. When Princester asked the assembly to form its committee, and first of all to elect a president, the name that was renowned throughout the world entered the minds of all present, but a religious respect sealed their lips, and after a moment's silence, the absent notaire was elected by acclamation. Having been invited to take the chair between Zeta and an angel of Japan, Arcade immediately began as follows. Sons of heaven! My comrades! You have freed yourselves from the bonds of celestial servitude, you have shaken off the thrall of him called Iave, but to whom we should here accord his veritable name of Ialdabaoth, for he is not the creator of the worlds, but merely an ignorant and barbarous demiurge, who having obtained possession of a minute portion of the universe has therein sown suffering and death. Sons of heaven, tell me, I charge you, whether you will combat and destroy Ialdabaoth? All with one voice made answer. We will. And many speaking all together swore they would scale the mountain of Ialdabaoth, and hurl down the walls of jasper and porphyry, and plunge the tyrant of heaven into eternal darkness. But a voice of crystal pierced through the sullen murmur. Tremble, ye impious, sacrilegious madmen! The Lord hath already lifted his dread arm to smite you. It was a loyal angel who, with an impulse of faith and love, envying the glory of confessors and martyrs, jealous and eager, like his God himself, to emulate man in the beauty of sacrifice, had flung himself in the midst of the blasphemers, to brave them, to confound them, and to fall beneath their blows. The assembly turned upon him with furious unanimity. Those nearest to him overwhelmed him with blows. He continued to cry, in a clear, ringing voice, "Glory to God! Glory to God! Glory to God!" A rebel seized him by the neck and strangled his praises of the Almighty in his throat. He was thrown to the ground, trampled underfoot. Princester picked him up, took him by the wings between his fingers, then rising like a column of smoke, opened a ventilator, which no one else could have reached, and passed the faithful angel through it. Order was immediately restored. Comrades, continued Arcade, now that we have affirmed our stern resolve, we must examine the possible plans of campaign, and choose the best. You will therefore have to consider if we should attack the enemy in full force, or whether it were better, by a lengthy and assiduous propaganda, to win the inhabitants of heaven to our cause. War! War! Shouted the assembled host. And it seemed as if one could hear the sound of trumpets and the rolling of drums. Théophile, whom Princester had dragged to the meeting, rose, pale and unstrung, and, speaking with emotion, said, "Brethren, do not take ill what I am about to say, for it is the friendship I have for you that inspires me. I am but a poor musician. But, believe me, all your plans will come to naught before the divine wisdom which has foreseen everything." Théophile Ballet sat down amid hisses. And Arcade continued. Ialdabaoth foresees everything. I do not contest it. He foresees everything, but in order to leave us our free will he acts towards us absolutely as if he foresaw nothing. Every instant he is surprised, disconcerted, the most probable events take him unawares. The obligation which he has undertaken, to reconcile with his prescience the liberty of both men and angels, throws him constantly into inextricable difficulties and terrible dilemmas. He never sees further than the end of his nose. He did not expect Adam's disobedience, and so little did he anticipate the wickedness of men that he repented having made them, and drowned them in the waters of the flood, and all the animals as well, though he had no fault to find with the animals. For blindness he is only to be compared with Charles X, his favorite king. If we are prudent, it will be easy to take him by surprise. I think that these observations will be calculated to reassure my brother. Théophile made no reply. He loved God, but he was fearful of sharing the fate of the faithful angel. One of the best-informed spirits of the assembly, Mammon, was not altogether reassured by the remarks of his brother Arcade. "Bethink you," said this spirit, "Ioldeboth has little general culture, but he is a soldier, to the marrow of his bones. The organization of paradise is a thoroughly military organization. It is founded on hierarchy and discipline. Passive obedience is imposed there as a fundamental law. The angels form an army. Compare this spot with the Elysian fields which Virgil depicts for you. In the Elysian fields reign liberty, reason, and wisdom. The happy shades hold converse together in the groves of myrtle. In the heaven of Ioldeboth there is no civil population. Everyone is enrolled, numbered, registered. It is a barracks and a field for maneuvers. Remember that." Arcade replied that they must look at their adversary in his true colors, and that the military organization of paradise was far more reminiscent of the villages of King Coffee than of the Prussia of Frederick the Great. "Already," said he, "at the time of the first revolt, before the beginning of time, the conflict raged for 2 days, and Ioldeboth's throne was made to totter. Nevertheless, the demiurge gained the victory. But to what did he owe it? To the thunderstorm which happened to come on during the conflict. The thunderbolts falling on Lucifer and his angels struck them down, bruised and blackened, and Ioldeboth owed his victory to the thunderbolts. Thunder is his sole weapon. He abuses its power. In the midst of thunder and lightning he promulgates his laws. Fire goeth before him, says the prophet. Now Seneca, the philosopher, said that the thunderbolt in its fall brings peril to very few, but fear to all. This remark was true enough for men of the first century of the Christian era. It is no longer so for the angels of the 20th, all of which goes to prove that, in spite of his thunder, he is not very powerful. It was acute terror that made men rear him a tower of unbaked brick and bitumen. When myriads of celestial spirits, furnished with machines which modern science puts at their disposal, make an assault upon the heavens, think you, comrades, that the old master of the solar system, surrounded with his angels, armed as in the time of Abraham, will be able to resist them? To this day the warriors of the demiurge wear helmets of gold and shields of diamond. Michael, his best captain, knows no other tactics than the hand-to-hand combat. To him Pharaoh's chariots are still the latest thing, and he has never heard of the Macedonian phalanx. And young Arcade lengthily prolonged the parallel between the armed herds of Ioldeboth and the intelligent fighting men of the rebel army. Then the question of pecuniary resources arose. Zeta asserted that there was enough money to commence war, that the electrophores were in order, that an initial victory would obtain them credit. The discussion continued, amid turbulence and confusion. In this parliament of angels, as in the synods of men, empty words flowed in abundance. Disturbances grew more violent and more frequent as the time for putting the resolution drew near. It was beyond question that supreme command would be entrusted to him who had first raised the flag of revolt. But as everyone aspired to act as Lucifer's lieutenant, each in describing the kind of fighting man to be preferred drew a portrait of himself. Thus Alcor, the youngest of the rebellious angels, arose and spoke rapidly as follows. In Ioldeboth's army, happily for us, the officers obtain their posts by seniority. This being the case, there is little likelihood of the command falling into the hands of a military genius, for men are not made leaders by prolonged habits of obedience, and close attention to minutiae is not a good apprenticeship for the evolution of vast plans of campaign. If we consult ancient and modern history, we shall see that the greatest leaders were kings like Alexander and Frederick, aristocrats like Caesar and Turin, or men impatient of red tape like Bonaparte. A routine man will always be poor or second-rate. Comrades, let us appoint intelligent leaders, men in the prime of life, to command us. An old man may retain the habit of winning victories, but only a young man can acquire it. Alcor then gave place to an angel of the philosophic order, who mounted the rostrum and spoke thus. War never was an exact science, a clearly defined art. The genius of the race, or the brain of the individual, has ever modified it. Now how are we to define the qualities necessary for a general in command in the war of the future, where one must consider greater masses and a larger number of movements than the intelligence of man can conceive? The multiplication of technical means, by infinitely multiplying the opportunities for mistake, paralyzes the genius of those in command. At a certain stage in the progress of military science, a stage which our models, the Europeans, are about to reach, the cleverest leader and the most ignorant become equalized by reason of their incapacity. Another result of great modern armaments is that the law of numbers tends to rule with inflexible rigor. It is of course true that 10 angels in revolt are worth more than 10 angels of Ialdabaoth. It is not at all certain that 1,000,000 rebellious angels are worth more than 1,000,000 of Ialdabaoth's angels. Great numbers, in war as elsewhere, annihilate intelligence and individual superiority in favor of a sort of exceedingly rudimentary collective soul. A buzz of conversation drowned the voice of the philosophic angel, and he concluded his speech in an atmosphere of general indifference. The tribune then resounded with calls to arms and promises of victory. The sword was held up to praise, the sword which defends the right. The triumph of the angels in revolt was celebrated 20 times beforehand, to the plaudits of a delirious crowd. Cries of war rose to the silent heavens, "Give us war!" In the midst of these transports Prince Istar hoisted himself onto the platform, and the floor creaked under his weight. "Comrades," said he, "you wish for victory, and it is a very natural desire, but you must be moldy with literature and poetry if you expect to obtain it from war. The idea of making war can nowadays only enter the brain of a sottish bourgeois or a belated romantic. What is war? A burlesque masquerade in the midst of which fatuous patriots sing their stupid dithyrambs. Had Napoleon possessed a practical mind he would not have made war, but he was a dreamer, intoxicated with Ossian. You cry, 'Give us war.' You are visionaries. When will you become thinkers? The thinkers do not look for power and strength from any of the dreams which constitute military art, tactics, strategy, fortifications, artillery, and all that rubbish. They do not believe in war, which is a fantasy, they believe in chemistry, which is a science. They know the way to put victory into an algebraic formula." And drawing from his pocket a small bottle, which he held up to the meeting, Prince Istar exclaimed, "Victory, it is here."